All right, here we go. Welcome everybody to Success Coaching's CSM Mastermind live event. My name's James Scott. I'm a partner here at Success Coaching, and I'm delighted to have you back for another one of our live calls. And I'm particularly excited actually this month about the topic we're going to be discussing. I think it's something that in the world of customer success we struggle with. And so the purpose of these is to help hopefully share some tips and tricks that are going to help you as CSMs to be more effective in your day-to-day jobs. And I'm excited that today I'm going to be joined by some expert CSMs from around the world who are going to be here sharing some of their experiences and some of their advice on how to deal with this particular question. So just as a reminder, this is a live call, so if you are listening live, you are welcome to ask questions via the Q&A panel at any point during the event. I will try to weave those into the discussion as we go along. This is meant to be super relaxed, so I don't want to save all the questions till the end. If we've got some good questions that make sense to weave in earlier, I will certainly do that. So please ask those through the Q&A panel. If you're listening to the recorded version of this call, then sorry you missed the live event, but hopefully you'll be able to join us at some point in the future for one of our next CSM Masterminds. So the topic for today is all about customer desired outcomes, something that I think in customer success we spend a lot of time talking about. And, we talk about how we're going to help customers be successful and achieve their desired outcomes. But certainly my experience talking to a lot of CSMs is the practice is a lot harder. How do we have those conversations? How do we ask the right questions? How do we track and measure and demonstrate the impact of the work we're doing on customer outcomes? And so I thought that would be a really interesting topic to explore with the group today. So without further ado, let me introduce our three experts. Let's start with Matt Watkins. Matt's joining us from literally the other side of the world in Australia. So Matt, would you like to just introduce yourself? Tell us a bit about your current role and your background, where you are, etc. So the listeners can get to know you.
Sure thing. Hi everyone, my name is Matt. I am currently dialing in from Sydney, Australia, where I work for LinkedIn. At LinkedIn, I'm a customer success manager working in the talent solutions team. Looking after enterprise and SMB staffing clients. Prior to LinkedIn, my background has been mostly talent acquisition, working in-house at some large media organizations and also staffing agencies.
Great. Well, and I think it's just after 4 a.m. in the morning. So, when we set up this, had the idea for CSM Mastermind, we really wanted to bring in experts from around the world. These are CSMs that have been nominated to us as being great at what they do. But of course, that brings with it other challenges. So we really appreciate you getting up early this morning.
No worries.
Ben, how about we move on to you? Welcome.
Sure, thanks for having me. I'm Australian, but I work out of New York City. I'm currently working as a senior customer success manager on the Bizzabo platform. Bizzabo is the world's first event success platform. So we really help do the whole event marketing cycle from in-person check-in to inviting people to the event, the whole agenda, all under one roof. So I've been living in America for the last 3 years now, and prior to that, I used to work in financial services back home in Melbourne.
Got it. Fantastic. Well, so we have a Brit in Australia and an Australian in the US. Tori, yeah, you're next. Can you match that?
I mean, I don't have anything fun to say. My name's Tori Dealio. I'm signing in from Irvine, California, so not super fun, but it is sunny here, which is nice. I work for a company called Pushpay, which is located in Redmond, Washington. We're a giving and engagement solution as well as payment processor for a lot of nonprofit organizations. So yeah, I've been with Pushpay for about 2 years, and prior to that, I did a lot of retail in Seattle and Southern California.
Got it. Fantastic. Well, I'm certainly jealous of the sunshine. So you've got that going for you. That's brilliant. Thank you all for being here again. As I said, this is going to be a informal discussion, and as I ask some questions, just to kind of get us going, feel free to jump in and share your experiences and build on what each other's saying, because as we know, in the world of customer success, there are lots of different flavors of CSM. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So it's interesting to kind of hear different perspectives. And I think that's one of the things that brings a lot of value to the people listening. So I want to kind of think about this question of desired outcomes and how we better understand our customers' desired outcomes, and think of it in kind of 3 stages. The first is understanding what they are in the first place, right? So asking the right questions, capturing that information, eliciting that information from customers up front. And then I want to move on later in the call and talk about what we do with that information once we have it, how we use it within our organizations. And then the third piece I'd like to chat about is how we kind of complete that loop, and how we talk then back to customers about the impact we've had and how it relates to the outcomes that they're looking for. So let's start with the first part, which is eliciting that information in the first place. And Matt, maybe let's start with you, because I know that this is something that at LinkedIn you've got kind of a pretty structured framework around. So I'd love to hear a bit more about how when that starts, when that conversation starts, and how you ask customers what are sort of questions you ask, and how to get that information out of customers who may not necessarily even know the answer themselves, I guess.
Yeah, no, sure thing. So I think fundamentally for all CSMs, discovery is such an imperative part of our role, and everything starts with discovery. At LinkedIn, we've kind of fairly recently introduced something called the SPICE Discovery Framework, and that was introduced to us by a manager. And this looks at situational, pain, impact, critical event, and decision. And what's great about this framework is you can kind of dive in at any point, and kind of pick which area you want to start with. But to focus on kind of your question, it will be around kind of the situational and pain element that our customers are feeling. So we always look at, when we first talk to clients and we first get that introduction, we really want to find out what the current state and the current goals are, and to find out how they rate our products or how they're finding our services. This kind of then moves and develops into the pain, and we get to find out what their challenges are, and kind of what stands in the way of them achieving success. And then obviously, again, this kind of moves into the more impactful conversations. And a kind of a question that I always like to use is, what can I do as a customer success manager to make you successful? And then we're able to really delve into what we need to do, what they deem to be desired outcomes.
Got it. Okay, so you kind of, we know when you ask that question about like, what are you looking for from me? What sort of responses do you get? The kind of response that you'd hope for? Because I mean, I think one of the challenges is, do customers know? How much do they need to be led, and how much do they gonna, already know the answers to some of these things?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So we, again, kind of focused on the why, and always kind of keep focusing, using that why question to really get to the pain point. So even when they think that they've kind of asked us, kind of told us what they feel their pain point is, we have to kind of delve into, again, kind of move more into that pain and find out why that is a problem, and why they feel that our product or products are going to solve that problem for them. And it's really essential for us to kind of start that conversation with the discovery piece. And that's when we can, like I said, really focus on what they deem to be kind of the desired outcome. And then we've got that, and we can measure that. Got
it. We'll come back to defining it and measuring it in a moment, because that's a big topic as well. Ben, did you how does that look at Bizzabo?
Yeah, it's similar in a lot of aspects. We're really lucky at Bizzabo that we have an exceptional sales team, And we've partnered with the sales team to encourage them to really dive into that pain point from their side before we've even received it. Our product is lucky in a sense because people don't run events usually to sell tickets. They usually run events because they have a revenue goal in mind, or they have a specific thought leadership that they want to provide to the community that they're servicing. So we're quite lucky in the sense that usually when I'm speaking to the decision maker, the person that's decided to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on running an event, that they've got a really firm grasp of what their goal is. And our product maybe, for example, can't measure per se whether all of those people got the thought leadership that they expected at that event, but we're always able to frame our conversations with the client and make sure that they're being reminded that the functionality of the tool is not necessarily what they purchased. It's also the strategic insight that us as customer success managers are able to provide to them to help them achieve those goals whilst also using our product.
Got it. Interesting. So do you have, you mentioned a couple there of kind of typical outcomes that a customer may already have in mind. So, I mean, I'm just curious, I know some companies will have maybe a list of those already and actually use that to help the customer to articulate what success looks like, where rather than just saying, what is success, free text field, right? Which is
hard. So in our kickoff call that we have, I will paraphrase what I've learned from the account executive. So Matt, you're looking to increase your registration by 30% and achieve X amount of ticket sales revenue overall. And that gives them the opportunity to confirm, yes, this is what we're looking for, or say, Ben, you've completely missed the point, and then really dive into it. So that's part one of it, because we want to talk about it at a high level, but then we want to dump into something a little bit more granular when we talk to them about, so what specifically does Bizzabo, as compared to any of our competitors, going to do to help you achieve that goal? And then they're starting to talk more about our specific feature set or us as CSMs and tie it explicitly to their really high level goal that we mentioned earlier in the call. It's also a really, really good opportunity to show that you've been listening all the way through the sales process and you're not asking them redundant questions over and over again. Right.
Yeah. And I'd like to talk more about that sales handover piece and hear some of your other experiences from the other folks on the call as well. But I think you hit on a good point there, which is in our kind of quest to think more about business impacts and outcomes as an industry, we've tried to elevate our conversation away from features and benefits and talk about the bigger picture. But at the end of the day, whilst that is ultimately what's going to determine whether they consider the relationship a success or not, we do have to execute against it, and the features are part of what enables us to do that. So I like the way you kind of then ask them to tie it back to the things that they know about the product or the solution that support those goals, because that's really what you're going to have to do behind the scenes, isn't it?
Exactly. You can have the best website in the world, but if no one's buying tickets, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Cool. Tori, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so it's very similar at Pushpay. What I will say is the thing that may be a little bit different is, so we have several different teams that we work with, even as a CSM. So we have kind of a whole process. So a customer will go through the sales process with an SDR and a sales executive, and then they'll actually be pushed over to our implementation team, which will spend, depending on how large the customer is, about 3 to 6 months implementing the software, because it is can be robust, especially if they're new to the space or something to that effect. And then at that point, it would be pushed over to the CSM. So the reason why I kind of explain that is because sometimes some of those pain points change, right? Maybe they came on board because there was a specific pain point, but within that 3 to 6 implementation process, that pain point is no longer a pain point. So then as a CSM, you're almost rediscovering another pain point or another reason as to why they're going to continue to stay on with the product. And then too, as a CSM, part of our job is to ensure that the renewal happens, right, at the end of whatever their initial term was. So as a strategic CSM, I really try to not only bring the value with features and adoption, but also really selling myself from that strategic kind of overarching mindset of, hey, I talk with other customers that are exactly in the same boat that, oh yeah, by the way, they're 4 miles down the street from you and I can set up a conversation or something to that effect. I do a lot of the strategic conversations around like strategy and now what's next. So it's not just a feature and a pain point. It's more about how can we get you to achieve that next level of success? Because we do know that every organization wants to continue to grow, right? So we kind of try to get to have them think in a different light of not just the day-to-day of like, what can this feature do for you? It's more about how can we get you to continue to see success on the platform and within your organization.
Interesting. Yeah, the quote, success is a journey, not a destination, right? So, but I like what you suggested there in terms of almost kind of inspiring them or helping them to discover other ways, other maybe strategic goals by connecting them with other customers who are maybe on the same journey but a bit further along.
Yeah, definitely.
Because there'll be a reason, there'll be some desired outcomes they have in mind when they first sign up. But at some point, you hope you will help them achieve those, and then what's next? Well, they may not really fully know. So helping kind of connect them and inspire them is interesting.
I think it's really, really interesting what Tori said about how sometimes the desired business outcomes can change. And I think all CSMs experience this as well. You can start a conversation focusing what the current state is, what the goals are, and then also talking about what the challenges are. But unless you kind of really continuously have these regular catch-ups with your clients, you're not going to know if things change. And as always, I think Tori kind of hit the nail on the head when she said how these decisions, these problems do change, especially if you have a process where they are passed to different teams in your organization. So yeah, that's something I picked up what Tori just said.
Yeah.
I can relate to.
And even if the problems themselves or the goals themselves don't change, the priorities might.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, you might be focused on a particular business outcome and then something changes in the business or in the macro environment that the customer operates in, which causes a change in priorities. And instead of, achieving this increase in revenue, they want to focus on, being the fastest or getting some cost reduction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's why it's so important to have, as CSMs, we're having these discovery conversations continuously throughout the cycle, right away from kind of the implementation and when the sale happens to, when you're focused on the renewal and kind of strategizing of what success looks like in 6 months, 12 months time.
Yeah.
Right.
I think too, sorry, Ben, I'm talking over you.
No worries.
One thing that I will say too, just to kind of add to that, is that I think too, that kind of layers in another really important idea of like being multi-threaded in an account, because not only will business priorities change, but it really depends on who you're talking to, what the priority is. So a lot of the time you'll find that you may be on the same page with 2 people or 2 decision makers, but they have an entire executive board that makes this decision. So how do you ensure that it's kind of almost your job as a CSM too, to make sure everyone is aligned and really kind of get down into the weeds of, okay, let's do some more discovery and let's really figure out like what the goal here is for the next quarter or the next year or whatever it may be.
And that was pretty much exactly the words right out of my mouth. But there's a big difference as well between your company or your client's desired outcome and then your user's desired outcome. If you're talking to functional users who aren't the decision maker, your job is to make them look awesome to the decision maker. It's going to make your life really easy. And that might be making that person more efficient, and they don't really know or have direct influence on the business objective. So making sure, like you said, it's multi-threaded and you're not just reliant on one VP who might not be down in the weeds of the actual tool every day is critical. It's mission critical. It's non-negotiable in my personal opinion.
Yeah, you can't achieve the business outcomes unless you have the users bought in. And we've probably all been in that situation where we've got people kind of resisting change or resisting the steps we know that the company needs to take to be successful against the broader picture. but the user doesn't see it, and the user just cares about what's important to them. So yeah, there's a whole change management piece in there. But I agree with all of you that kind of part of the CSM's role you're saying is to kind of connect the, make sure there's alignment, not just between you and the customer, but sometimes also within the customer's organization around what really is success. Yeah, interesting. Cool. So let's dig into that piece around where that conversation happens a little bit more, because we've talked about it happening in sales, we've talked about it happening in onboarding or implementation, talked about it happening on a continual basis during the customer success relationship. How do we make sure that wherever it's happening, it ends up in the right place? I'm just curious, like practically how that happens, really, practically how that happens in your organizations. How do you make sure that sales discussion doesn't stay in a CRM that only sales sees? And how do you make sure that those small additional pieces of information that happen in onboarding make their way to you as the person ultimately owning the success of the account?
Yeah, we use a couple of tools. So first, to create mutual accountability with the client, I will be sharing my understanding of their outcomes in a Google Doc or a Google slideshow presentation, and they're replying to me signing off that, yes, you understand what my business outcomes are. After that, we use Gainsight, and previously I've used other CRM overlays to manage that internally, because ideally, fingers crossed it doesn't happen, if I got hit by a bus, I want the person sitting next to me to be able to sit right in my seat, log in, and service that client without their business objectives taking a hit, unlike me in this hypothetical.
Let's imagine you won the lottery. I think
that's a better one.
That's the better one.
Yeah, so definitely making sure that their client has them written down, or a copy of what my understanding is really key.
Right.
And also that my entire business unit is able to have visibility into it just using the platforms we use.
Okay. So you do a little bit with the CRM, a little bit with a kind of a shared Google Doc.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, for LinkedIn, we make sure everything is documented. So like if Ben said, should anything happen, hopefully win the lottery rather than get hit by a bus. But should anything happen, anyone in the team can step in and kind of read through the notes and understand exactly what the current situation is and what we're trying to solve for them using kind of the LinkedIn products. Also, as well as having kind of CRM systems in place and those kind of types of documentation, we and I'm sure it's different in Tori's and Ben's teams, but we at LinkedIn, we work quite closely with our relationship manager and media solutions manager, which work almost as a 3 in a sales team. So it's really important that throughout the whole process, depending on what products our customers have invested in, is that we're having kind of regular dialogue despite living in different states. We're always meeting, talking through what their recent meetings have been, because sometimes the CSM, the RM, and the media solutions manager won't always be in the same room having the meetings with the customer, because sometimes the conversation will be on media spend. Sometimes the conversation will be on strategy and renewals, which doesn't necessarily mean that the CSM has to be in the room, but it's important that we're aligned as a 3, as a team on everything that's going on. So, having a really solid understanding as a 3 or as a team, having those regular catch-ups, understanding where each other's play is at that point in time is really helpful and really obviously important for us.
You've got kind of the notes in the CRM, the formal piece, and then you've got that kind of that in-person or that, that virtual meeting where you're also just discussing the account as an account team, as kind of all the people involved with that account.
Yeah, you need to make sure you bring everyone along on the journey, and make sure if I'm kind of focusing on a metric that I want to increase for our customers, I'm not kind of keeping it to myself and kind of got my head in the sand and focus on that. The RM and the media solution manager and the people in other teams who are helping the customer are a lot along that journey with me as well.
Got it. Tori, anything to add?
Yeah, for us, everything is documented in Salesforce. We have a few different tools that will like connect our Gmail or other kind of tools to Salesforce. Everything can be logged there automatically, and everyone in the organization from sales to product has access to Salesforce. Some things are a little bit different, but for the most part, you can see like the high level activities and phone calls and things like that. I think the only thing that is a little bit different is we've kind of come from a stage of everything was documented in Google Sheets. Like there was a Google Sheet from everything. Just because, you know, startup mentality of we don't know what we don't know, right? So we have just kind of moved within the last year or so really in kind of making Salesforce our source of truth. What's also a little bit unique about Pushpay is we have data, right? Because we process payments. We have data that comes directly from our platform, feeds into Salesforce, and then feeds out into like another tool, like Tableau or mainly really Tableau, that will give us real-time data about our customers so that anyone that has access, like other CSMs, for example, or buddies or backups or anything like that will have access to that data to be able to see those dashboards and see kind of real-time analytics on the customer to be able to have those conversations if needed, if the CSM is out or something to that effect, or an account manager to have those renewal conversations or something to that effect. So we really do try our best to put everything in Salesforce. Some of our teams actually communicate directly out of Salesforce as well too. Not all of us, but some do. And then our ticketing system is actually in Salesforce as well. So you can really see a full, full picture of a customer really just looking at Salesforce.
Right. And that, you know, seems like common sense, but in a lot of organizations that data is siloed and that's part of the problem. Yeah. The team's not talking, but the system's not talking. Right. Yeah. Now you hit on an interesting point there, which is maybe takes us into the next phase of the process, which is the kind of what we do with that information and how we track it and things like that. And you know, I guess we've got objective and subjective type outcomes, but for the objective stuff, the quantifiable data piece, I guess it's slightly easier if we can measure the things that our customer is also concerned about and interested in. So Ben, your example was revenue. If they have a revenue target, I imagine you have great visibility into how they're doing against that. And same with Tori with the, you know, the e-commerce piece and the, you know, you have visibility into how much money is flowing through systems, which is what I'm guessing for a lot of the customers is one of their outcomes. Whereas other companies, it may be harder. It may be harder to see that metric. So I'm just curious, what your experiences have been either in the current role and previous roles when it comes to actually having access to the metrics and tracking progress. So Ben, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, so as part of the presentation of our kickoff call, we show them like the acronym for SMART goals: specific, measurable, actionable, and I forget the RT, but we get it. And sometimes the client does come with, you know, a really measurable goal such as revenue, but sometimes it's like increased brand recognition. And so it's part of your job as a CSM to dig into that. So you've identified, client, that brand recognition is the be all and end all. How do you tell how it's getting better? And they say, oh, we just know. And I'm like, well, I'm sure your CMO doesn't just accept you coming to them and saying, I just know it's got better. So your CMO, your VP, your director, whoever it is in that organization should at some point in some document somewhere have a way of measuring that goal. Otherwise it wouldn't be their objective. So it's asking really open questions and slowly funneling down into a yes, no question that's going to help you get those more intangible goals to be metric driven. Because it's really hard to say, yeah, I saw a couple more tweets about your brand, or
Right.
do you feel more operationally efficient? That's too
Yeah.
hard in a renewal conversation to say,
Right.
yes, you achieved that.
Right. Right. And how does that I mean, I can imagine that conversation sometimes results in in what you need, and other times maybe they can't share it with you. Maybe, maybe they have the number and they just don't feel comfortable sharing that level of
Um,
metric with you. Do you ever have that type of
Personally,
pushback?
I haven't had pushback on like I can't share that number with you or anything like that.
Okay.
Sometimes, especially like I mentioned with operational efficiency targets or brand recognition or thought leadership targets that are more intangible,
Mhm.
I end up, sending them off. And whilst we're doing the onboarding process, I'm asking them at the end of each call. So you mentioned you were going to try and develop some internal metrics for operational efficiency. Where are you at with that? And I'm able to provide them with some guidance and some goals myself, but I want them to come up with that concept to relate to myself as well as to the team to keep Bizzabo as an integral, sticky part of their event marketing solution.
Right. So you give them some homework,
Yes, I
and
love
then
giving homework.
yeah, and then they own. I guess they own it, right? Rather than you telling them the metric, you
Exactly.
feel
Because
ownership.
if they don't own it, then it's just a vanity metric. It's not really driving that business outcome that we've been having this conversation about. It's literally just a vanity metric, and that's not helpful.
Got it. Tori, Matt, anything to add?
Uh,
You can go ahead, Matt.
Okay. I was just going to add, at LinkedIn, I think one of the most difficult parts of my role as a CSM, our account team, is the metric of how we kind of measure success, because it's almost like the holy grail. As soon as you have that discovery conversation and you agree with the client or the customer what that metric is, then you can really start proving it. And the area of LinkedIn that I work in, talent solutions, I look after staffing agencies. So it's a fairly straightforward metric, because obviously they're obviously spending money on our platform, but there is a direct outcome of them using that product, which is a dollar figure. So we can use that metric to say, okay, well, look, you've made X amount of placements, and you've made X amount of money, and obviously you've saved this much money from using our products. But it's all around kind of working out what that metric is and agreeing that that's how you're going to measure the desired outcomes. And it always links back to the kind of discovery of that important discovery conversation on, and agreeing what that metric is. So then as soon as you agree with that with the decision maker, it makes your kind of quarterly business reviews or your kind of monthly catch up with that client much easier, because then you can demonstrate ROI, which is at the end of the day what we're trying to do with all our products that we're kind of offering to our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Gives you that common thread through every conversation. Tori, did you want to add something?
Yeah, so ours is kind of the same thing that Matt explained. It's I know what I try to do in my role is, if this large outcome is, an increase in revenue, right? It's how do we create a strategic plan of small little wins to get there, so they can start to see that value across. Like, we know that if you want to increase by this amount of percent, we know that you have to do A, B, and C for your organization. So we try to be very specific of, hey, based on all the customers that we work with, we know that these 3 things work. That's why we have that implementation process, because we know that these 5 steps have worked for all 8,000 of our customers. And then we start to kind of tweak them for their organization. Because at the end of the day, although I know the software better than they do, they know their organization better than I do. So it's like we have to work together and kind of have some give and take there, so that then too their team is bought in right away from the very beginning. Like, yes, they bought our product, but at the end of the day, they're not going to see any sort of results if they don't choose to use it the way that we know that it works. Right. So a lot of it is spent on that too. And then I think too, then it kind of goes back to, who are you talking to, right? You're not going to get the executive board in the room every single QBR that you do with the team. So it's, hey, maybe I'm talking, we work with a lot of communications team or IT teams on like the engagement aspect. And then we work with a lot of finance teams on more of, the finance aspect of our tool. So those goals are going to be completely different. But at the end of the day, if they two don't work together, then we also know that the tool isn't going to be launched properly. So it changes, but we kind of use all of our different tools internally to make sure that we're speaking to the right person on specific features, but then also making sure that within the organization that they're on the same page too and not working against each other. Because if they are, then we all lose.
Exactly. Yeah. And you kind of I like the way you talked about those kind of here are the steps to achieve this objective. And it reminds me of the concept of kind of lagging and leading measures. So there are the lagging measures are typically the most important metrics that they're trying to measure, but they could take a while to move in the right direction, or they could be very hard to measure, or you may not have as much visibility as you want. So finding some leading measures, like can we agree that overall this is the metric you care the most about, but can we agree that if these three are moving in the right direction, that there's a correlation between these and the bigger one? Yeah,
definitely. I think that's exactly what it is. And then as well as like comparison, I know I talked a little bit about like talking to other customers, but also I think where that could be a little bit of slippery slope is you can't compare a customer that's here with a customer that is, very high revenue, all of those different things. So it's like, would you even agree that this is this is a customer that's kind of in the same boat as you? Because we find that could be a little bit of a slippery slope too, is we want to make sure that we're comparing organizations that are kind of in the same ballpark as the one
that's an interesting question. And the second question, do you find customers ever come in with unrealistic expectations around the business outcomes? Because of, I'm not going to beat up sales, but it could be something on the website or a Google ad listing that said 50% cost saving. And now you're like, you've got to kind of reset it back down to, 20% is probably realistic for a company like you. Ben, you're nodding away there.
I'll let you take that
one. We've all heard or watched the documentaries about Fire Festival, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, so events are pretty fraught in that, like, hey, I'm going to have an event with 130,000 people, and you're saying, well, have you ran an event before? And they're like, oh yeah, like I planned my wedding. I'm like, completely different things.
Right.
And at the end of the day, because the software that we run, it really underpins the whole event as far as like the software piece, like obviously not hardware, but being able to kind of give them the institutional knowledge that they would need to successfully run an event of that size and that caliber is where we're going to kind of save that relationship and be really upfront with them, just saying like, you've set a really ambitious target and that's awesome and we're here to help you achieve it. I think that something like blah is maybe a little bit more closer to what I've seen other people in your vertical achieve in a similar time frame.
Mm-hmm.
And then doing that earlier rather than later, so you're not kind of getting up to that renewal or that supposed moment of truth and it turning into a moment of like, we actually, tying it back to the desired outcomes as well, we run what we call event expert presentations. So if we identify during like the kickoff call, for example, that sponsorship revenue and sponsorships in general are the key to your event success, I will provide them with like a presentation that I host over 30 minutes that talks about providing value to their sponsors. And it might not have anything to do with our platform, but it's again a way of showing us as strategic consultants as opposed to account managers,
right.
Which is quite similar to what you were saying earlier about how you're talking about to your customers and comparing them and making sure they're kind of like on a mutual path.
Absolutely. Cool. It's been a great conversation so far. Just a reminder for those of you listening, this is CSM Mastermind. We're talking with Matt Watkins from LinkedIn, Ben Anthowitz from Bizaboo, and Tori Dealio from Pushpay. If you wish to ask any questions on the topics topic we're discussing today, which is all around customer desired outcomes. You can do that using the Q&A panel on your Zoom webinar app, and I'll be happy to weave those into the conversation. We've got about 15 minutes left, so let's move into that last phase of the journey around outcomes, which is the demonstration of value back to the people that need to know about it. So we're assuming we've done a good job of discovery. We're assuming we've helped set realistic expectations. We've gone away and done everything we need to do in terms of driving value and using it within our organizations to make sure we're doing the right things. How do we then make sure that the customer appreciates and understands what we've done for them? Because that's ultimately, perception is reality, right? That's what they're going to base their decision on at the end of the day. So how does that work in your organizations? Matt, maybe you want to kick us off?
Yeah, no, that's I wanted to maybe kick off with kind of a question to Tori and Ben, because LinkedIn, especially with the Talent Solutions product, our clients have their own way of measuring what success, what their ROI is. They can measure it themselves. So we come into the QBR sessions sometimes, and our customers are providing us with their information and their metrics, because they're able to measure it themselves, whether they've used a product and they've managed to make a placement or hire someone for another organization. It's very easy for them to measure their success. So at the beginning in the discovery conversation, we have to kind of agree, are we going to use their kind of metrics, or are we going to share data and we can agree that we're sharing our data and we agree that these are the metrics that we're going to be using. So I was keen to find out from Ben and Tori, how do your customers in your kind of areas have ways of measuring success, or is it solely with you in your kind of CSM org?
For the most part, like our product provides like a lot of analytics on it, and it's kind of we position it as a single source of truth for your event marketing spend and like your event marketing solution overall. However, going back to some of the more intangible goals, like attendee satisfaction, like obviously we can give them an NPS rating or whatever from their attendee, but it's quite intangible. So it is kind of a matter of speaking their language, which is marketing, and sometimes that isn't anything apart from subjective. But being able to sit down and like reopen that kickoff deck or take a slide out of that kickoff deck to pop into the EBR and say, hey, like you were interested in that talent acquisition goal, and just reminding them, like snapping them back on that focus is really key, especially when the goal's not so like black and white.
Yeah.
So you take a slide from the kickoff and put it into the EBR, and you're referring back to that.
Yeah, I do that first slide.
First slide. Okay.
For us, we usually do kind of these like executive business reviews in person on site if we can, dependent on, we work with a few different tiers of customers. So we try to do as many like on-site visits as we can. And we'll do something similar, like Ben mentioned, is kind of say like, hey, during the implementation process, this was the number you were trying to hit, and then this is where you're at. And then start to talk through, like, you know, even if it's not a great number, it start to talk through why. Like it could have been something on us, it could have been on something on them. Maybe there was staffing turnover, maybe there was something that went on with the organization. So sometimes it is very like data driven. If we're talking to like a finance team of, hey, this is the goal you wanted to hit, and this is what you did, and this is how we got you there. Or when we start to talk about engagement, because we do build kind of engagement tools or applications as well for our customers, that's when it can kind of become a little muddy, because their goals can be different. We do provide kind of some analytics on the back end of that tool to show downloads and things like that, but it's like, how do you really track engagement outside of an increase of, you know, people attending live stream or something to that effect. So then we start to kind of tie the two tools together, like maybe bringing in like how many people were engaged with your application that then went and processed a payment. So we try to kind of tie those two things together a little bit, and saying like, hey, there was an increase in the digital engagement because they went from your application and they process the donation. So it changes for everyone. Or then sometimes it could just be, hey, this was your goal to be at, X amount of dollars for this campaign, and you achieve that over this course of time or this percentage. So yeah, that's kind of how we do. We are able, to use the data and analytics from our finance tool, which is really great. But then also, to Matt's point too, is some of our customers have financials elsewhere outside of our platform. So if they choose to not put everything into our source of truth, then we don't have that accurate picture. So we kind of have to have that agreed upon at the beginning as well, or at least call that out in those reviews of, hey, this is just a picture of what you've given us. If you want to give us more, then we can kind of give you more of an accurate picture.
Mm-hmm. It's a good point as well about tying it back to actions, because even if you miss your client's desired outcome, we use the word desired because that's what they want. It might not necessarily be what they get. And being able to talk to them about the actions that they did take to reach the goal, or perhaps some opportunities for their next event or their next fundraiser or their next hiring drive, whatever the case may be with your tool or software, to kind of give them the thought leadership. Like, we are actually thinking about what we can do to help you achieve that, as opposed to just like getting stuck in the features and like, we missed that target.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. So it sounds like, you're kind of using data from the product itself, but then also trying to leverage other data sources. And that seems to be a theme, right? We have more data now than we have ever had about our customers, but we've not really developed our data muscles at the same pace we've generated our data kind of, creation efforts. So we're generating more data, but we haven't necessarily done as good a job of tying it all together. And there's probably a lot of data that exists within your organizations, and I'm guessing the organizations of people who are listening to the call, that would be helpful in that ROI demonstration if we were able to connect those dots and get access to it at the right time in the right format and all that good stuff. So I think that's something that all companies are thinking more and more about, is how do we become customer data is customer information. How do we really use that rather than having to ask things? I think all of you are, at least we focus a lot of the conversation on a higher touch type relationship with customers. But when you have a lower touch relationship and you can't ask these questions in the sort of detail or as often as you've described, maybe you have to rely much more then on data to get a picture of how a customer is performing. Do any of you have, obviously I know LinkedIn has customers, a large number of customers. I suspect there's some lower touch ones in there as well, but I'm interested if any of you have used data in other kind of customer segments in any interesting ways to show value.
Mm-hmm. So even we kind of have 3 tiers of high touch, medium touch, and low to tech touch, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all the accounts, regardless of what their spend is or what their appropriate experience is, receive that kickoff call. And so let's say that person's going to be enrolled in the lower touch, the tech touch program, but I've identified that sponsorship is the goal, part of their goals there. Mm-hmm. I will then enroll them into a program that's within the software platform that are highlighting the things that are relevant to sponsors. And maybe those things wouldn't be relevant to someone that cares about registration increase. That also enrolls them into like an email campaign that sends more focused communications about that topic. Mm-hmm. And then our program lead, who does fortnightly webinars, she will be creating content that is focused on where people are identifying their goals and outcomes. So a little bit of it both.
Yeah, so you're taking that data and using it to personalize the communications and the campaign.
Exactly.
to their outcomes.
That's exactly the same what we do, or similar to what we do at LinkedIn as well. So we'll have kind of large books of customers. Obviously, we focus on, we use a flagged account system. So we focused on the customers that we flag, that we see opportunity in, and those other accounts, we use a lot of data and metrics and run those on Tableau to find out if maybe they need assistance in X, or they're performing very well in another area, and maybe this information will be helpful, and we can then obviously serve them the correct content based on their behaviors. So really we're using data and metrics that we get from their behavior, and then we're able to channel through comms, training, and the areas that we think will improve their experiences with our products. And we can send
making some assumptions about what their outcomes are.
Yeah.
The actions that they're taking.
Yeah, just based on the data and metrics that we've got from them.
Interesting. Yeah. And sorry, Tori, I'll let you answer that question, but also I'm interested whether you have any other ways of like asking customers at scale what outcomes they're looking for. Because I know I've seen it more and more where that's built into some form of onboarding flow, or within the actual app itself, there's a way to say, why are you here? Why did you sign up? And then I assume that data goes somewhere useful. But
yeah, we with all our customers, similar to Ben and maybe similar to Tori, we have kind of a kickoff call, and obviously everything is documented. But yeah, like you said, we kind of, our products do enable customers to provide feedback, and that feedback is kind of, we kind of look at that data, and that helps inform us to make decisions on what we assume they're trying to achieve, and then we will obviously reach out to them in various methods, and then hopefully they'll provide us with feedback, and then we can make a more informed next steps to help them achieve their desired outcomes.
Got it. Tori.
Yeah. We do very kind of the same thing. We have like feedback that's built directly into the software, like the back end of the platform, so administrators can go in and send us feedback. We also do some surveys as well, depending on time of year, that customers can, we send out these surveys and say, rate us on this, and then, fill in the blank on if there are any notes. But for kind of our smaller segment of customers, we do very similar to what Ben mentioned, kind of that tech touch, automated, like you have the kickoff call, but then we start to use the data that we have that's in Tableau or in Salesforce, that will start to then surface like, hey, we noticed that you are maybe not performing as great with this, so then we're going to offer up this feature for you to enable, and this is how you do it, and this is how you use it. Same thing with webinars. So we have kind of a team that oversees some webinars for tech touch that will start to surface kind of that content out to kind of, those lower touch customers.
Got it.
Yeah.
I think so it sounds like all of you have kind of some form of kickoff call. There's not a fully zero touch, tech touch path for collecting outcomes. But I mean, I have seen that. There's personal experience, going into signing up for some apps and getting that initial onboarding experience, asking you about.
I think that's one of the probably, I'm sure Ben and Tori could talk to this as well. One of the kind of the big challenges CSMs face is obviously providing that level of service at scale, and obviously making sure they're kind of we're enabling our customers to achieve their desired outcomes, and getting those data and that metrics from them. But then obviously doing that at scale, if you have obviously a large number of customers that sit in the same boat, that may be struggling in one area and need training, and we can provide that. But how do we do that at scale is something that we're always working with at LinkedIn.
Yeah, and I think the fact that, all of you are CSMs, obviously you are focusing on higher touch accounts. That's why you are in the job, and that purely data-driven approach tends to be driven by kind of a different team structure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ben.
Yeah, I used to be the growth account manager, so I had 200 odd clients that were just mine. So it's really difficult. It's definitely like a chicken and the egg fallacy, because you kind of have to, continue with egg analogies, break a few eggs to make an omelet. And sometimes you have to test something with 200 clients and they're all spending 5 figures or more and they're kind of pulling back from you. And then sometimes you do just have to get on the phone with them, even knowing there's lots. That's a really big challenge for any organization, especially one that's growing and your feature set is changing.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any like silver bullet from it apart from trying and
Yeah.
seeing what works.
Well, not yet, at least. I know there's definitely technology solutions starting to emerge where they're trying to improve that collaboration between customers and the vendor. Because if you think about it, all the information we have on customers sits in our CRM and the customer has no visibility into it. So I like the idea of a little bit more collaboration around outcomes, and there's definitely some interesting things that I've heard of happening in that space. So maybe this will be a challenge that that at least gets easier in coming months. One question actually from one of our participants today. For a new CSM that doesn't have expertise on a particular domain or industry vertical that a customer is part of, how do you upskill or prepare yourself to have those conversations with customers so that you sound credible and I guess if you sound like that you don't know what you're talking about, you're probably not going to get the right type of information back. So any quick tips in the last couple of minutes here on when you've got into a new role, how have you got yourself up to speed so you can have those conversations with those customers?
We're all customer success managers and we're listening to a customer success webinar right now. It's very specific. I almost guarantee there is a podcast, a webinar, a thought leadership somewhere in the industry that you're working in. If you're a really small company, your founders are still going to be accessible and really passionate about whatever business pain that your tool is solving. So speaking to them and your other senior CSMs, et cetera, in your company. Especially in your first few calls when you're talking to customers who might know more, probably do more about the industry that you're working in, thinking of your questions as a funnel. So asking open questions and then getting down to that binary. So you mean yes or you mean no. And that's a really great way to ensure you're understanding what they're talking about instead of talking in really broad strokes.
Got it. So almost learn from your customers. Yeah. Tori.
I think that's really good. I think for me, when I first kind of came into CSM world, I spent a ton of time listening to calls. I'm sure that even as a small organization, like you're recording calls. So listen to as many calls as you can from all different areas of the business, including sales, so that you know what kind of questions they're asking and that you can then reiterate those questions on calls that you have with those customers. We have like a technical team as well. So I spent a lot of time shadowing them and see what kind of questions are being asked from our customers, which I think is huge to kind of learn not only the technical aspect, but then just to learn what your customers need. And then kind of go back to what Ben said is open-ended. So I would always ask, like, tell me a little bit about your process. Like, what are you currently doing today? And then, is that working or how is it not working? And then you start to hear and you get a better idea of what is happening with your customer to better understand, like probably a lot of the customers that you are going to be working with are going to have a lot of those same kind of pain points or same processes. So you're already going to be learning more right there just from that one question.
Love it. Love it. Ask questions, ask good questions. And at the same time, not only do you look smart, but you learn from what your customer's telling you as well. So I think it's a great piece of advice to finish up on. We are unfortunately at time. I do want to thank again our 3 expert panelists, Matt Watkins from LinkedIn, Ben Anthony's from Bizzabo, and Tori Dealio from Pushpay. Thank you all for being with us today and sharing your wisdom and experiences. And I hope for those of you listening, you'll be able to join us on our next call, which will be in a month's time. You can find full details in our learning platform. We'll be talking about how to build long-term trusted advisor relationships with your key customers. So we'll have another panel of CSMs joining us for that one, and we hope you can join us too. But that's it for today. Thank you again. This is James Scott from Success Coaching, and you've been listening to CSM Mastermind. Bye-bye.